you're a single parent income, it's nearly impossible to survive.
Thousands of Idaho students were identified as homeless last school year.
A lot of times it's an invisible problem.
School districts are required to count and support K-12 kids experiencing homelessness under a little-known federal law.
So that law helps, no matter what, our kids to be in school, and then it provides the resources that they need to keep in school.
A law meant to give them an equal shot at education.
My kids wouldn't be the kids that they are if I didn't have the program or the help or anything.
While most Idaho school districts are doing their best to ensure student success, it can be challenging to identify homeless kids.
It's easy to get lost in the cracks.
And there's not much money or incentives out there to help them. So it's likely hundreds more unhoused kids are undercounted and unsupported.
Our reporting and our data reflects that there's only X amount, but in reality it's such a larger problem. It's really hard to address that and find a solution that's appropriate.
Mama.
What are your hopes for your kids in the future?
Honestly, right now, my main concern is them getting the best education that they can. Come on. Just to better themselves. Okay, hold on with them. Because I don't want them living the life I live. Come on. I don't want them living the poverty life.
But more kids, like Tara Smallwood, are living that life in Idaho. Last school year, more than 9,100 public and charter school students in pre-K through 12th grade were identified as homeless, up 1,300 over the past 5 years. That's about 3% of all Idaho students. The State Department of Education says children with disabilities, migrants, and English learners are disproportionately impacted.
A lot of times that could be contributed to just the economic climate that we're in. I think we're also doing a better job at identifying students through our training, through our outreach.
Exactly. Amber Rains.
I needed a stepping stone to really learn what stability looked like.
And Jessica Kaufman.
I was in a place where I was couch hopping and trying to figure it out.
Live in City Lights transitional housing.
Do it. Just be brave.
And each have kids in the public school system.
What led you to City Light?
Toxic relationships, my addiction. I had gotten a DUI and went to jail, and then came here after that.
Do it again.
Their children had to move schools multiple times, causing more instability by disrupting their education and development.
My son sort of lost the passion to go to school because he just, he didn't really want to deal with it.
But she says her daughter moved schools and thrived.
My daughter was a little younger, and so for her, things were just a little easier to adapt.
Statistics show kids who experience homelessness at any point in their childhood score more poorly on standardized tests than others, have a higher need for special education, are more likely to fall behind, and are less likely to graduate high school.
It's really easy to get off track and lose hope.
A Center for Public Integrity analysis found graduation rates for unhoused Idaho students lagged more than 20% behind the average graduation rate. Jessica's son did not wind up like most others in his position.
Yeah, he graduated, yeah.
She credits that in part to a federal law requiring public schools to assist homeless students to break the cycle of poverty.
So McKinney-Vento is the federal law that ensures that students experiencing homelessness have access to education.
Created in the late 80s, the McKinney-Vento Homeless Assistance Act requires districts to identify all unhoused students and accompanied youth.
How do you identify homeless students?
So by law, every school district has a McKinney-Vento liaison, and during enrollment, they have a housing questionnaire that they send out, and so families can complete that housing questionnaire.
The definition of who counts as homeless is broad. It means anyone who lacks a, quote, fixed, regular, and adequate nighttime residence. It includes students who are unsheltered, staying in cars, in substandard housing, living in shelters or transitional housing, and in hotels and motels. But the vast majority of students identified as homeless are living doubled up with friends or family. Once they're identified, the school must waive enrollment requirements like immunization records, refer families to services, support kids academically, and provide transportation so they can stay in the school they attended before becoming homeless.
Just phone calls from the social worker is where it began. If there was anything that they could do to support me. Offering for food, gas vouchers, the McKinney-Vento busing to keep her in the same school district even though we moved to a different one. Back to school clothing.
Through the law, the U.S. Department of Education also gives states money based on a complex formula. Then, school districts can apply through their State Department of Ed for competitive subgrants to implement the program at the district level.
They would get help with sports that they wanted to do, which was really helpful because I was going through my program.
Are you talking to me? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Pretty much anything we needed.
I slept okay.
Anything to ensure unhoused kids stay in school and have a fair shot at a future.
I think it's kids that graduate from high school with either a GED or high school diploma are 3.5 times less likely to experience homelessness in adulthood. So we really, really want to push them and retain them and get them to that finish line there.
Without the assistance, it would have been really difficult to navigate all the things to keep them included in the education system for sure.
You guys remember when we did the express powers? What did you have?
Making the invisible
So they wanted the state to hold all the power.
visible in rural Idaho.
Oh, so it's just like opposite?
I'm Jen Wright. I'm a high school principal over at Notice High School. But I'm also federal programs director, the grant coordinator, and McKinney-Vento liaison. In small districts, you do it all.
As the district's McKinney-Vento liaison, Wright keeps unhoused kids in school.
Benefit is we know our family's here, so we make sure they graduate, or we figure out a plan.
Just summarizing each section.
She makes sure they enroll no matter what, educates families about opportunities for their children, refers them to healthcare and housing services, and so much more.
We're their safe space. We're their home away from home. Sometimes we're their only home.
What does legislate mean?
Last year in Notice,
Make law.
12% of students were identified as homeless.
So they're behind in rent, so then they find themselves without a place to live.
The number of identified homeless students in Notice is much higher than the statewide average of around 3%.
Thank you, Corbin.
But experts believe that statewide number is likely an undercount.
It is a problem, and we're doing what we can to mitigate that with our annual trainings, with creating those community partnerships of cross-referral and cross-training as well, public outreach.
Part of the advantage of being in a smaller district is we can greet them at the door. We can ask those questions, and then we can follow up.
Nationally, it's estimated at least 5 to 10% of students in poverty eligible for free or reduced lunch experience homelessness under the McKinney-Vento definition.
Do you think that this broad definition may lead to undercounting? People may not identify themselves as homeless?
Definitely.
7 Investigates analyzed Idaho Department of Education data and found it's possible at least 750 kids in Idaho who aren't stably housed are going unidentified by the school districts mandated to serve them. And 37 public school districts, not including charters, are likely undercounting.
I think the traditional idea of homelessness is, parking your car at a park somewhere and having to sleep in it.
Students most likely to go uncounted are those whose families don't realize they qualify for McKinney-Vento.
If you're staying with family, you have a home. You're not living out of your car.
And their schools fail to follow the rules and educate them.
I didn't know things like that even were available. If the social worker has no idea and the parents have no idea, how do they even know to ask the right questions? I think that's where you lose people.
Students can also fall through the cracks.
Probably because of the shame.
Due to the stigma.
It's kind of embarrassing to be in a situation like that to begin with, and so I can see a lot of people going unnoticed.
Everyone has their definition of what homelessness is.
Idaho's Title IXA coordinator, Emily Summer, says some families are afraid to admit they're struggling because they don't trust the government.
They're afraid that their kids are going to be taken away. They could have negative experiences with state agencies in the past as well. We are reporting, and our data reflects that there's only X amount, but in reality it's such a larger problem. It's really hard to address that and find a solution that's appropriate for that size of an issue.
Not only are students falling through the cracks, 7 Investigates also discovered most Idaho school districts are missing out on federal funds set aside for homeless students. Summer says only 29 out of the 180 public and charter school districts in the state applied for the competitive McKinney-Vento subgrants this cycle through the State Department of Ed. in part because it's not a whole lot of money.
It's a fixed amount, and it's dependent on how many schools apply.
Districts may not apply because it may not be worth it.
So if it's non-legislative, that would mean
Non-making laws.
The American Rescue Plan Act of 2021 included an historic $800 million for all districts to identify and support the needs of homeless children.
stuff other than making laws that Congress is in charge of.
But the school year before the pandemic, Idaho's McKinney-Vento funding was 8th lowest in the nation, totaling about $40 per identified homeless student.
It's not feasible.
A fraction of what schools actually spend to support them.
Well, that's not even a tank of gas.
When districts make a decision to accept federal funding, they have to take into consideration what their staffing is, their timing, and their resources, because some of the requirements that we have with federal funding requires data collection. They're subject to auditing.
Wright has to lean on other grants as well to help her students.
Not only like the food pantry or school supplies or help with first month's rent or gas vouchers or, understanding like, oh, they need glasses.
But at the end of the day,
Ms. Miller?
she says every little bit helps.
So I think without the sub-grants, we wouldn't be able to do what we do, which is provide the basic needs for these kids.
Do you wish the federal government would allot more money to this?
They need to, absolutely. Because, as you know, if basic needs aren't being met or if there's that barrier to learning, then they're not going to show up. Or then their attendance is terrible. Or then they eventually, as you know, the numbers, they drop out because they feel defeated.
Oh, so it's just like opposite?
Without safe and stable housing,
I thought you guys knew.
high school is even harder for Lauren Lopez. She's homeless and doesn't live with a parent or guardian.
Ms. Miller?
Notice School District's McKinney-Vento liaison Jen Wright supports Lauren and students like her.
It's that daily grind of making sure that you're doing that job.
I know Notice gives a couple kids some gas, cards for gift cards for the gas station to help them get to school if they drive.
But the first step in helping them is identifying them.
Right, as much power as possible.
Having social workers that reach out to and being connected, that's also important. Because if nobody's watching and nobody's helping or you're not being seen, it would be so easy to get lost.
He's like, wrong one, Jess.
It's critical kids experiencing homelessness are seen, experts say,
Hey, guess what? I smell onion rings.
so we can grasp the gravity of the crisis.
And so if we don't have accurate data, it's hard to find an appropriate solution for that.
It falls on state education departments to enforce the homeless education law, to monitor districts, and determine whether they're complying with the law.
Their success is our success. So we really look at, okay, this is where they're at. How can we give them the support and the training that they need to help inform them to improve?
But a 2014 Government Accountability Office investigation found there's not adequate oversight of the program. And families, the federal government, and states don't have many options or the capacity to hold districts accountable. While experts say hundreds of Idaho students are likely falling through the cracks, data shows most districts in the state are doing a good job counting homeless students.
We are beating the national average of identifying rates of homelessness.
Emily Summer says more families report their houseless in housing questionnaires when confidentiality is promised and living situations are clearly explained.
At some point, awareness needs to be raised for the qualifications. You don't have to be sleeping on a park bench or living in your car to be homeless, and that there are resources available that can help just help you along your way to bettering your situation.
Food pantry.
The law requires state departments of ed to host trainings every year and liaisons to attend them.
Especially with an emphasis on building those really good relationships with families and restoring that trust, reducing that stigma of homelessness.
Summer says they're doing more in-depth trainings multiple times a year, which is key given the high turnover in liaison positions.
We go through the signs of homelessness.
And they go through how homelessness impacts student achievement.
The needs of these children are very, very unique, and that they face unique challenges, and therefore it's really important for them to have these supportive services in place for them and to have them readily available. Outreach as well. I mean, we developing those community partnerships, because more often than not, families that are experiencing homelessness, their needs cross through multiple agencies and community resources.
I was going to put mine up there. Papa!
Referrals and strong partnerships between school staff and homeless shelters, for example,
Emma, can you take yours?
ensure kids experiencing housing instability have the same access to free and appropriate education as their classmates.
Did you sleep good last night?
And they've gone through school having more than what they need because of that help.
Summer says more partnerships are in the works, including a statewide school supply and hygiene drive. To increase identification,
we're raising awareness within the community to highlight these issues.
She says they're also doing more community outreach and posting McKinney-Vento posters in more visible places.
We're also launching another initiative next year to incentivize students that are experiencing homelessness to graduate from high school and attend college. If we can get them to graduate from high school with a high school diploma or a GED, they're 3.5 times less likely to experience homelessness in adulthood.
Why is it so critical if they graduate?
I think it's because it's not just a piece of paper, it's the accomplishment. Like, through the adversity, through everything, I showed resilience. And I was able to get this.
The way you keep me guessing, I'm not eating, I'm guessing. I count it as a blessing. Sorry.
And if they have adult mentors or a teacher or anybody in their corner, or cheerleader in their corner, just to remind them, like, you can do this. Life is hard, but look how far you've come, and look, these are some resources.
As the number of homeless students rises in Idaho, people doing this work every day know
They're all of our kids.
Investing in their lives helps break the generational cycle of poverty.
And I think that's one of the issues here is that a lot of times it's an invisible problem. That is one of the reasons why I'm in this is because, one, it makes a difference in their lives, and two, it's an issue that deserves some highlight.
All I gotta say is, thanks, keep up the good work.